Hello everybody, welcome back to Growing in the Cove. My name is Stacy and I garden in Zone 5B, Newfoundland. We are now at the end of a full week of RDF, rain, drizzle, fog. But the garden doesn't wait and I'm taking on a big project today. I have a fully mature honeysuckle shrub that I want to move. And right now is a great time to transplant shrubs. It's very wet and it'll give them time to root back in before the heat starts. So this is going to be a big undertaking, but let's give it a go. This honeysuckle is located in basically the end of my vegetable garden and it's providing shade that I'm not happy about. So I really need to move it somewhere else on the property and hopefully it will survive and it will be happy. Behind it I have a lilac tree that will actually finally get some screen time when it's in bloom, because right now it is completely obstructed by this honeysuckle. I actually have no idea how big the roots of this shrub span out, so I'm just going to use my shovel and see if I can cut out a big root ball and hopefully easily take it out of the ground. Update, I'm a little worse for wear and I've dug up some massive roots from my aspen tree. This is going to need some work from the muscle of the house and I need my husband to help me out with this, but I have made big progress. Here is the root ball, which I am slowly digging up. I also did a massive prune so I could actually get around to the root ball. So it's very, very deeply rooted. I'm thinking this tree was probably planted when the house was built, and that was nearly 20 years ago. Look at these. What appear to be branches are actually roots of my aspen tree. I had no idea. I know people say don't plant these, and of course I didn't plant this tree, but I see why. And little suckers come off of all of these roots. So my aspen tree, if you see that greenish trunk, it's a beautiful trembling aspen, but there it is. And it's in pretty close proximity. So the roots have traveled out and they went around this honeysuckle and it literally has innervated into my lawn. And every year we get suckers coming up. So hopefully removing some of that aspen root will help. However, the honeysuckle root is not half as bad and I've just been using my loppers, these little pruners, to cut them as I go, and I've been using the pick and a shovel. To be continued. This is the perfect time of year to take stock of what you have in your garden and if you want to make any movements of perennials. So today I'm out here checking out what's coming up and I'm making a few changes of things that I think would look better in another place. I absolutely love using this perennial spade for this job of moving and dividing perennials. It's got a long handle and it's got a really small shovel. So you can very easily get in around small clumps of plants. I'm not someone who thinks you need to have a whole lot of tools to garden, but this is something that I use constantly. My favorite thing about taking stock in the garden is that I will find all sorts of self-seeders, like this beautifully healthy pansy, which has just self-seeded itself in the garden. I'm actually going to dig this up so I can put it closer to the front of the border. Look at the root system on this. It's amazing when you let things happen in the garden, all the little surprises that you'll find. I'm planting up some spring pots and I am reutilizing some old potting soil from last year's pots. I usually fill them up about halfway, and then I will top off the rest with fresh potting soil. It's a lot more economical for me to revive my old soil and use it, and I don't have to buy such large quantities of potting soil every year. In this pot, I'm planning on planting some violas and some lettuces. I think it'll be a real nice spring pop. These are my violas that were supposed to be purple, and all of them turned out yellow. Look at the amazing root systems. So every time I plant in pots, I always like to take a little bit of slow release fertilizer, and I'll put a little sprinkle at the bottom of each hole. So I'm going to continue planting, and I'll show you how it looks when it's done. And here we have my first spring pot. These will all fill in and look really good. This is actually a gift for a neighbor. So I have 4 violas, 2 lettuces, and I have I think this is a red boar kale in the center. But yeah, this is going to look really nice in a few weeks. I'm gonna check on my winter sowing containers. If you've never seen these before, this is when you use recycled bottles and containers to make a self-contained greenhouse. So I actually planted all of these seeds back in, I believe, late January, and I put them directly out into the snow. And I really haven't touched them until now. So if you did this project with me, or if you've started your own containers back a few months ago, it's a great time to check your containers and see how they're doing. And I'm willing to bet that you probably have some sort of growth going on in there. So I'm going to give you a look at how these containers are doing. So first off, I have some Dara, also known as chocolate lace flower. And if you look in there, you can see, here we go. We've got some little tiny seedlings coming up. So I'm not going to open that one. I also have some poppies, and you can kind of see these growing in there. This is my favorite way to grow poppies. So they're doing great. I'm going to let them grow on a little bit longer before I take them out. This is probably the most exciting, and this is agrostemma, also known as corn cockle. And as you can see, I've got some really healthy seedlings in here. So I'll be planting these out using the chunk of seedlings method, where I will literally split this into a couple of big chunks, and I won't thin them out and just plant big chunks of these directly into the garden. They don't need to be hardened off because they've been actually grown in these conditions, and they are ready to go out in the garden right now. So if you have seedlings that look like this, plant them out. They won't get any transplant shock, and they're going to take off as soon as they get into the ground. If you have containers that look like this and don't seem to be doing much of anything, look really closely, because there's a very good chance, if you can see, there's a few tiny little seedlings down there. This was a total experiment with the blue Himalayan poppy, which is incredibly hard to grow. I tried to grow this indoors and I only got 3 seedlings, and I've got at least maybe 3. They're so tiny and hard to see, but I can see at least 2 in there, so that is promising. I'm also pulling out some of last year's green onions. Onions are a biennial, so even though these look like perfectly fine onions, they're gonna produce seed, and actually they are not very tender and already are very woody at the base. So I'm gonna pull out these onions because I have fresh green onions to be planted. There's very little that gets wasted around here, and all of the old plants, debris, and everything from last year's garden goes straight into my tumbling composter, where it will break down and make a beautiful compost that will go back onto my garden to feed the soil. This is a great way to do things, and it's a way for me to be a little bit more sustainable and not have to constantly be buying inputs to put in my garden. If I have really thick stalks of old garden debris, like these old kale stalks, I do like to help speed things up a bit and cut them into smaller pieces so they'll break down faster in my composter. A few days ago, I planted up this bed with lettuce and kale. I like to do crop rotation, but this is one bed that I just don't do that with. I have a tree that is behind it, and this bed can get a little tiny bit shaded in the summer, which I use to my advantage because that is ideal for things like lettuce that like to bolt and go to seed. So I've planted this with a few different varieties of lettuce. I have iceberg lettuce. I have a new one to me called Sierra. And I also have Lola Rosa, which I'm very excited about. It's a loose leaf red Italian lettuce, looks beautiful. I've also got some dino kales in the background and some red boar kale, which has this amazing deep purple color. I've grown both of these varieties before, but I think the red boar may be my favorite. I have this massive amount of seedlings hardened off and ready to go into the garden. I'm hoping I'm going to get this done in the next week. I do have a mixture of some vegetables and also mostly flowers. I've got larkspur, I've got my sweet peas that need to be planted, I've got these beautiful snapdragons, foxgloves, I've got a whole litany of violas ready to go out in the garden, pincushion flower, sweet williams, rudbeckia, green onion, leek, cabbage, Swiss chard, mizuna, the list goes on. So I've got a lot of work ahead of me, but I love when I can finally get my cold hardy plants outside and have them be a little more independent and need less caretaking from me. So I've got a lot of work ahead of me, but hopefully I'll get all of this done in short order. This is a bed that I tend to grow flowers in. It's not in the ultimate position, as I have a massive maple tree right above it that once that leafs out, the canopy does provide a little bit of shade. So I'm going to start this bed off by direct seeding some early blooming annuals that will hopefully be done by midsummer and won't be so much affected by the shade that this provides. I'm also going to plant some mizuna in this bed, as I find that is a delicious brassica that bolts really quickly once it heats up. So it might stay a little cooler over here in the little bit of shade from my greenhouse, and also once the leaves come out on my maple tree. Here is my mizuna, which I'm going to be transplanting out in this bed. I started this, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago. So what I'm going to be using is one of my favorite tools, and this is called a dibber. I bought this at my local favorite place to buy seeds and garden things, Gaze Seed, which is located in downtown St. John's. You can also order off their website. But what I love about this is that you don't disturb a lot of the soil microbiota or anything like that. This really does just make a hole like so. And I always like to throw in a little bit of organic slow release fertilizer. This is not a super strong one, it's a 439, but I will sprinkle a little bit in every hole and then just pop the transplant in. And if I can get one out without tearing off the root system. So I'll then take my transplant and literally pop it in the hole, press down the soil, bam, and that's planted. So I love this. I use it for planting things all the time, and it's super fast. I'm going to be spacing these maybe about 6 inches apart. Now that my Mizuna is planted, behind that I am going to direct sow some flowers. This is something I'm trialing because I know a lot of people love just planting seeds in the ground. And to be honest, the more that I can direct sow out in the ground and not have to start indoors under grow lights, the better. So I have a few options. I'm not going to plant all of these, but I am definitely going to plant this purple tansy. It's also known as bee's friend, and it's related to borage, and apparently it's a total pollinator magnet. So I'm really excited to try this one. This one's definitely getting planted. I'm also definitely planting this Orlea white lace. I think this looks like a really pretty cut flower. I'm considering this mignonette. This is a very highly scented plant. I think it's like a Victorian plant that they used to use in those nosegays that they would, I don't know, sniff because everybody smelled bad. But anyway, I'm considering this. Also considering some baby's breath. This is the annual kind. I also have some chamomile, which I've never grown before, but I would like to make my own chamomile tea. I also have some nigella, so let's see what sort of decisions I make here. So this purple tansy says to do 1/8 of an inch deep and resow every 2 to 3 weeks from last frost until mid-June. This will produce an entire summer full of flowers and more reason for pollinator visits. But seeds will take from 15 to 27 days to germinate. So I'm going to try to be a little bit sparing with my seeds, so maybe I can continue to sow this throughout summer. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to once again use this dibber to make a line. Now this is only 1/8 of an inch deep, so you don't need to do this very deep at all. They have these little tiny lines on them. They almost look like, I don't know, little shells or something. Okay, so let's give this a go. The seeds for this were a lot smaller than I was anticipating. Oh, the worst thing about having beds that are, I think this is only 3 feet, but a 4-foot width on a raised bed is very difficult to reach across. All right, so I've just kind of sprinkled those liberally, and for 1/8 of an inch, I like to just push the soil over as so and pat down. But always be sure to label where the start of your row begins, because you will forget where you've planted your seeds. Next up, we have Orlea. To plant this 1/4 inch, so slightly deeper. I've already got my tag in to mark the row, and I've spaced it, I don't know, maybe 10 inches from the other one. It's probably going to be too close together, but I do like to plant things pretty close together, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I'm going to make another trench. So if you've ever grown Queen Anne's lace or Ammi, this is very similar. So this must be, looks similar to parsnip seeds. I wonder, is this also in the carrot family? It does have those same sort of ferny leaves. So let's give it a go. It says to space them, the plants should be spaced 6 inches apart. So I will thin them, but I don't know, I'll probably put one every inch or so. Okay, so all my seeds are planted and I'm gonna cover over. And pat down so there's good contact between the seeds and the soil. Next up, we've got some chamomile, and I'm gonna repeat the same process. This says to do a 1/4 inch. Well-drained soil, plant after last frost. I'm not doing that, so let's see how this goes. Wow, these chamomile seeds are almost like dust. Just had to show you those before I plant them. My baby just woke up from her nap, so I can't finish this job, but I will water everything in really well. I do have a lot of slug pressure in this garden, and I know a lot of people are into gardening organically, but I do tend to use slug pellets, at least at the beginning of the season. If not, my seedlings will not stand a chance. So I'm gonna water this in really well for all the seeds that have been planted and continue to keep it moist until I see some germination. I'm finally getting around to planting my sweet peas. This is something that I usually have done by now, but it's okay because it's been a little bit on the cooler side. However, sweet peas are super hardy and they can take it. As you can see, a lot of my sweet peas have some cold damage, and you can tell that because they have these white markings on the leaves. But if you actually look at the very base of the plants, they are branching out and coming back really healthy. So this is what you want. And when you put sweet peas in really cold conditions, you get super hardy, tough plants that don't need to be pinched because they literally just branch from the bottom on their own. So these are looking worse for wear, but I promise you they're going to pull through and they're going to look beautiful. Every year I plant them on this pea netting. I'm going to take some compost, which I just took out of my tumbling composter, and spread it across this row where the sweet peas are going to be planted. Sweet peas are really heavy feeders, and it's a really good idea to give them really healthy soil to grow in. So you could bury kelp in, you could add some really well rotted manure, and it's even a good idea to continually fertilize them with like fish fertilizer throughout, or like a kelp tea throughout the growing season, because they're very, very heavy feeders. So I've got all of my pots of sweet peas lined up. Sweet peas normally don't like root disturbance, and in the past when I've grown them in these pots, I've actually separated them out before planting them. But I'm going to try something different, and I'm going to plant each pot directly into the ground and not mess with the roots and see if I get healthier plants. So let's give it a go. I've got each pot spaced probably about 6 inches apart. So let's start with this one. This is all of these I think were self-collected seeds, but this was a really pretty lilac colored sweet pea that I found in a ripple mix. So I called it fireweed streamer because it reminded me of the color of fireweed, which grows wild and actually grows along this wooded area behind my pea wall. So I'm just going to bury this whole thing, and I'm also going to add some slow release fertilizer, organic. This is a 439, just to add a little bit of extra nutrition. And like that, there we go. And I'm just going to leave these and see how they do. And look at the roots on these. They are ready to get into the ground. and I'll pop it in. I'm going to keep all my tags so I know which variety is planted where. And right now you don't have to worry about training these to grow up the net, because as they grow you can get your string and tie them on. So right now I just really want to get them established in the ground. So that concludes me planting sweet peas on my sweet pea fence. The second half of this pea fence will be for edible peas, where I will very soon be direct sowing my sugar snap peas. So thank you so much for joining me today. I know this video has been such a random assortment of garden tasks, but that's what it's like for me this time of year. And as a new mom, I take advantage to get little jobs done when I can. So happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And until next time, bye.